season 2. So is there anything special in this that would be, wow, you really want to start here first? If you start diving into season 1, season 2, you're going to miss some important events or some important ideas, concepts.
Right. And no, there wouldn't be, because obviously if you say, well, I'm going to start my superhero campaign pre or post COVID, let's just take a really simple thing that is fairly topical. Obviously, what choices the characters may make, what choices that you might have in your setting, if you take a major event and you start it pre or post, that could obviously change what your characters are going to be doing. But what we present in Absolute Power is backstory. And so when you say, well, if I'm going to jump in, I want to start something in 2021. Well, of course, what happened in 2020 and before that all still happened. It just choose where you're going to start your campaign. If you want to start in 2022, great. Everything that was in 2021 and 2020 and before that all still happened. So there's no worry of when people decide to jump in. The only difference would be, of course, if you decide, I'm going to set my game in 1990, then clearly anything that happened after that hasn't happened, unless you bring in some sort of parallel universe, time travel, which is always easy enough to explain away. But people aren't going to be walking around with their iPhones, and
the good old.
It's actually funny watching old TV shows now, something set in the 80s or 90s. I'm like, oh my God, this whole plot would be gone if he just picked up a cell phone and called someone. But that wasn't it back then. And so, yeah, it does change your choices you make. But in terms of, is there a danger in starting later? No. And that's because everything new builds on everything in the past.
Perfect. Ready for some viewer questions, Heathen Dog, or do you have any follow-ups here?
No, I'm good.
All right, let's some of these. So with the other superhero games out there, what makes this one the one to have?
Yeah. And so everyone has their own favorite superhero game. If you go online, go to Reddit or anything else, and someone says, oh, what superhero game should I play? Everyone will talk about their favorite game. And there are so many superhero games. And so we're not saying Absolute Power is the best. No, absolutely not. I would say if you're going to play a superhero game, number one thing is you have to like the system. Because while you can create your own world, creating your own system is not a lot of people are set up to do that. Not a lot of people want to do that. So if you like rolling a single D20, Mutants and Masterminds probably for you. If you like rolling dice pools, you're going to be in a different game. If you want something super rules light, you're going to go with a more narrative type system. So we think TriStat is more closer to the vein of a Champions or / Hero or a GURPS, in the sense of it is a comprehensive, multi-genre, multi-universal point buy system. And so you're building exactly what you want. So you're not going to do a lot of hand waving unless you want to. And of course, you can always hand wave as much as you want in a game. But if you want to have a specific weapon that operates in a very specific way, Absolute Power is great for building that, because that's what TriStat can do. You can go as much into the weeds and be as specific about how you fly. Well, here's exactly how my flight power works. Great. You can build it exactly like that. Or in a different game, you can just say, I have flight, and just leave it at that. That's fine too. So I would say, why would you choose Absolute Power? Well, you like the system. And if you don't like the underlying system, it doesn't matter how good anything else is. You're not going to be happy with it. That said, because we're building such a great world in Absolute Power with, all the characters and the concepts that we're having, if you decide to play Mutants Masterminds and that's your game of choice, or Heroes Unlimited, or, the new Marvel multiverse game, if that is your game of choice, but you can take elements from Absolute Power that we have and the characters, the concepts, just the same way as most people, if they're running a role-playing game, they're going to bring in their versions or their inspiration from DC or Marvel, maybe Image, or maybe even TV like The Boys or Invincible, and they're going to bring in their own influences. And Absolute Power has so much that you can build upon. So we give all the obviously character stats for our game, but even if you decide to not use their stats, first of all, you can kind of see how they're built, but then you can use all the background and the character elements and use them in any game you want. So we think it's an awesome game, and it's different because it's set during the modern world. It's not a fictitious world. If you want to play a fictitious world, great. You can still play Absolute Power and just say it's no longer New York-like. It is no longer real world-like. You're just running the system and characters, and you can do that too. I mean, that's the great thing about role-playing, right? Is you can make it exactly what you want, regardless of what it's going to be. But we think if you don't like an underlying system, it's going to be problematic to really get into a game.
Sure. Well, that's one of the things I can tell you from people I have on my panel on Friday nights and people that I talk to, there are people out there who really like the tri-stat system. They like the simplicity of it. I've got to be honest. I have I've showed it off a couple times here, but I have the tri-stat book. I've got Besim. I've got Absolute. I still haven't played it yet. I've read through it and I'm like, actually, this does make sense. And because I do have Hero System. I don't know if you can see it there, but one of the editions of Hero System right there. I don't see a difference. Now, this is where I want you to yell at me. I want you to correct me. What is the difference between Hero System and Tri-Stat when it comes to character creation? I know the die roll system is totally different,
Right, yeah.
because as he knows, champions used to confuse the living crap out of me when I was younger, and we'd make characters and I'm arguing this, that, and the next thing, variable power pools and multis, this and that. I'm like, I just want to spend some points to make character. But the beauty of it is the fact, like you're saying, you can make whatever you want, and I want to enjoy that, and I want to love that. But then it's like, you know what? Can I just make a character?
Yeah.
At some point here, can I just make the character?
Yeah, any of the more comprehensive point buy systems are going to have a certain similarity to them, and we certainly, because it is comprehensive, it is point buy, that's automatically going to make character creation a little bit more complex if you want to create a character from scratch. But that's okay. I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing that. You can make it easy by choosing templates and say, I want to be a speedster template. And you just say, well, here's all the power packs you get from being a speedster, rather than building it from the ground up. But in terms of some of the older school point buy system, I would say the complexity of the math and how the language is makes a huge difference. It's almost like when you look at, say, ChatGPT, when people would type in what they want to see for an image created, and you can type in a very natural sentence with real words that all make sense, rather than technological words. And I kind of think that's similar to maybe Tri-Stat and some of the older school point buys. And so our game is very English easy.
It's funny you say that. We had that conversation on Friday night with
really?
AD&D first edition is High Gygaxian, and I got to translate it to English, which is why I like second edition AD&D, because I can read the rules and understand it.
And that's how we did with Tri-Stat. So it's flight, it's speed, it's not these acronyms. We don't use a lot of acronyms in the games. We don't have a lot of complex calculations. We have a few, like add your body, mind, and soul and divide by 3. I mean, that's your attack combat value, for example. And so it's not to say that there's no math whatsoever, but I would say for a point buy system, we have a very math light approach, a very written in English approach. And that is probably the largest difference between Tri-Stat and whether it's Hero or GURPS or something like that. It's also, the subdivisions on how far you go down with your division. So I don't want to get into any particular other game, but I know that sometimes you can take a character that has all these flaws and they're all like super insignificant, and the subdivisions are so tiny that it makes things very complex. Where our subdivisions aren't quite as tiny, unless, of course, if you want to make it, you can do that. So they're a little bit greater in the gradation of the scale. I know that, say, some of the the original Marvel superhero game was, here's a table, you look up this, and is it in yellow or red? And you can horizontal.
We're fans of the face rip game here.
Yeah, so. The face rip stuff. So we don't have anything like that. It's just, this is your flight speed. You fly at 1,000 kilometers an hour. It's level 3. Done. It's just it's that simple. And we try to keep that simple. But even that said, as a point buy system, it's still going to be highly complex if you want to get really super detailed. So you may spend an hour or two creating a character and fine tuning it. But then once it's created, then the system kind of disappears into the background when you're actually playing. It's very front end heavy, but the playing is 2 6-sided dice, maybe 3, maybe 4, but that's it for all, and compare it against a target number. That's it for all your rolls. It is so simple to play, but the comprehension or the complexity comes from the number of options for build. Hope that kind of answers your question.
No, it does. And one of the things that I really want to put out there, two points. Number one, those templates are fantastic. They really are helpful, and they are fantastic. I don't need Heathen Dog to make a character for me, because I can start on the template. But the second part of that is when I have not built a character from ground up in Besim. I've watched a few videos on it, yours. I've watched, I've looked through it, And I can tell you that at least from everything that you said, I believe it. I can't confirm it, but I believe it because when I read through, I was like, I get this. And, when I'm talking to you, and I'm not trying to dog champions at all. I think it's a product of its age, just like so many other things are. Was like, okay, this is a half a point. Wait, what does that mean? What does a half a point mean? like, what am I doing? In yours, it's broken down in 5s and 10s for the most part, or 2, 4, 6, 8. We can all handle that. I have found it at least conceptually much easier. And the tri-stat system itself, like you said, is a very easy system to play. And I honestly am the type of person that loves to make characters. I love making characters. So the fact that it takes 2 hours to make a character doesn't bother me as long as when I'm done with that, I've got what I wanted. And you can do that with a point buy system. Anything you want to follow up with, Heathen Dog, or do I move on to the next question?
Oh, just when you kept bringing up champions and you actually said variable power pool. And I'm like, well, they kind of have that in this game too. It's called dynamic powers.
Yeah, or power flux, depending on one is a more math based, one of them is more narrative based. Yeah.
For him, the whole variable power pool was bad because, oh my God, I have to get a power and then I have to remake the power on the fly in the middle of a game.
Right.
Number one, that doesn't make any damn sense. And number two, isn't that going to slow down gameplay a lot? Yes, and yes, it does. Dynamic powers, what you were speaking of earlier is that you can get very, very specific with power creation and how they work in your game. You can get very specific, but you don't have to be.
No.
Whereas dynamic powers, I'm gonna explain it for everyone watching in a second. It is supremely vague. Absolutely vague. So much so it would make his brain explode. Here's dynamic powers. If you have dynamic powers, you have fealty over a minor aspect of reality. Electricity, fire, wind, air, bears, oh my, whatever it is, you have aspect of it. And the power is different as long every time you use it, it can be different, but it has to be in that aspect. For example, electricity. You have minor control over electricity. This allows you to do several things. I can use this dynamic power to make someone's hair stand up. I can use this dynamic power to short circuit something. I could use this dynamic power to depower a battery.
Sounds very Mage like the that. Ascension like.
What's that? Mm-hmm. Yes. It's very much Mage the Ascension, two dots in forces. It's very much that, but specifically for electricity or fire or whatever, metal, whatever. But it gives the player a lot of leeway and a lot of chance for imagination to create effects on the fly without breaking the game. But I don't believe it gave enough. It gave some warning to the GMs. Hey, this power can get out of hand. Watch yourself before you allow this going. I don't think that was stressed enough. As a matter of fact, if I would put a point total, a maximum point total you could possibly put into this power, and have it be what most high end 300 point character would think ridiculously low. Because if you get this high enough, you're Green Lantern,
right?
And Green Lantern wins. I mean, they're like, oh, the comics doesn't win. No, you hit him from behind, you drug him, whatever. But in a level playing field, he wins every time. So you have to be sure to keep it down because you don't want to give the player a big enough Swiss Army knife. He will wreck your campaign with it.
Yeah, and with something, if you look at dynamic powers, the easiest way to say magic, right? So you can either cast spells with magic, or I do magic. And what does that mean? It's like, well, I have magic powers. I mean, I could, and whether it's elemental control or it's electricity or anything like that, it's basically like magic. And so there are characters in any genre of not just superheroes that have basically magic type abilities. They don't have discrete effects. So maybe in, obviously a D&D style mage will have very, very discrete effects. But what's the discrete effects of Magneto or Green Lantern? There aren't any. They just have abilities to do stuff. And they have magic. And so we give rankings from 1 to 10. Are you minor or are you primal and cosmic? Like And then that's very much a narrative role-playing tool. It's something that I really like, but at the same time, when I'm playing D&D, I want to play D&D. I want to have discrete spells like, oh, what spells am I going to memorize today? Because that is what you're playing. You're playing that type. But when I'm playing superheroes and I want to be storm type character, I can control elements of weather. I don't want to have to create every single thing I can do with that. I just want to say I can do weather effects. And as the narration goes, I just jump in and say, this is what I'm doing. And the GM will either say, oh, you can't do that. It's too powerful what you're suggesting. At your level that you bought, you could do not a bolt from heaven that's going to smite the entire city. You can do a house. Okay, well, that's because I only bought it at level 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever, rather than level 10. We have these powers in there because there's characters that we want to represent, like Magneto or Green Lantern, the Flash, that have these levels of powers. And it would be, it would make a different game is if we created a superhero game that couldn't do these levels, because that's not what we're creating. We're creating the multi-genre universal role-playing game for superheroes, not a Teen Titans role-playing game, which is a very small box.
You said something that, once again, I absolutely loved that you said, and that was, if you're playing D&D, you're expecting the D&D feel. Take that, people! When you're playing, Heroes Unlimited, or you're playing Besom, or you're playing Mage the Ascension, like I said before, I don't want the same magic in Mage the Ascension that's in D&D. I expect to have that type of feel of what that game presents. So I absolutely like that you said that you're trying to present the superhero feel, and from there, we take it how we want, so to speak. There is a comment here that's been, I don't know, I'm skipping one comment, we'll come back to it. This one's just in line. It says, Besom is the most simplest point buy system I've found. My sons and I have made many superheroes with it. Met you at Gen Con. So
awesome.
Cygos 360 met you at Gen Con. So I thought that was apropos since we were talking about the points. And again, as somebody who has not done nothing more than looking at the book and said, hey, I could do this, I could do that, I was mathing things in my head and it was making sense to me. So yes. Okay. And one final thing for folks out in chat, just because I say I like steak doesn't mean I dislike pork. Okay. So,
and specifically the reason why, based on that comment, why we did Silver Age Sentinels to begin with is people kept telling us they use Besom to play superhero games. We created it as the anime role-playing game, not to say that anime is a genre, but we created it for that. People say, oh, this is a great game for superheroes. I'm like, we hear this enough. Why don't we tailor the game more for superheroes? And that's how Silver Age Sentinels came about.
Mr. Max is Canadian, so he's wishing everybody a happy Thanksgiving. All right. Let me get my comments
Halcyon
back.
has a mechanics question.
Go ahead. I got a couple more here, but go ahead.
Where is it? I thought it's not here anymore. Okay, well I'll just say it then. I thought I saw something earlier, but there was a specific initiative question and I can't find it now.
That one. It was this one right here.
Okay.
Levi Rivers.
How does this system handle initiative for everyone when combat begins? Now, he's probably saying this because he doesn't have the book and he doesn't know, but he has enough books to where he knows champions. That some people roll one time at the beginning of combat and just keep that forever, barring any environmental effect. Some games have you roll every other round of actions or combat. How does absolute power work with this?
Yeah, and it's very simple. It's a 2d6 roll plus your attack combat value. That determines where you are in the initiative. You do it at once at the beginning of combat, and it stays there. Now, you can do it every round. Certainly, second edition D&D with AD&D I used to play. Well, we always did it every round. You redid your initiative. That's kind of maybe more old school. Things have moved more towards setting it once and going forward. But particularly with superhero games, but with any kind of games, how do you deal with someone that if you're early and you're super fast, but you don't know what someone else is going to do? How do you deal with that? So you can hold your initiative. And so you're ready in action. So if you were fighting someone who you wanted to see what they were going to do, maybe that you wanted to interrupt them in some ways, even though you're going first, you just hold your action. And then what you're doing is you're changing your initiative. And so your initiative is now, you were at 20, now you're going to go at 10. because you've held it until someone else goes at 10, so you can interact at that point. And for some people, that's how you deal with, dealing with some people. If you have a speedster who's super fast, how do you stop this speedster not from coming in, punching you, and running away? It happens all the time. And, if we want to represent that in superheroes, how do we stop someone like that? Well, we have to do it. You ready your action, you hold your action so that you can act whenever you need to. But in general, 2d6 plus your combat value. That's how you set your initiative.
Great.
Just to follow up here, my 16-year-old made unique, and I say this because I want to relate to Heathen Dog and his Champions videos, but my 16-year-old made a unique 100-point character in 1 minute, 30 seconds. I spent about another 30 minutes refining it. The thing, again, about these point system games, and it even happened to him doing the Champions one, is that you spend the time to make the character, but you better put some second eyes on that, because you're going to find that there's a better way to do it. Not that your way was wrong, but that there could be a better way to do it. And that's the trap I always fall into.
Not just better way, but a lot of times you may have flubbed a number. You have more or less points than you should because you didn't carry the one.
Your character creation video that I just watched the other day, I forget the character's name. You even had a couple of pop-ups on there. Oops, I meant to say 2 instead of 4 or whatever it was. So it happens to everybody.
Yeah. So what my general rule with point-based buy games are, you do it, and before it hits the table, another pair of eyes looks at it because you probably missed something.
Yeah, I mean, there's optimization, which really, I'm not big on optimization. It's like, oh, you have to make sure your character is the maximum good. It's like, no, make the character you want to make, but given a system as complex where you might have 50 pages of options, you might miss something. I thought this was 3 points per level. It's 2 points per level. Whenever we do all of the characters that we create them for any of our games, whether it's Besom or Absolute Power, we have to use spreadsheets, and inevitably, we enter a wrong number. And so you're going to be off on stuff. But as long as the general philosophy is there, that it's going to kind of represent what you want to do, the exact numbers aren't as important as getting the overall build correct.
Okay. Well, he said 1 hour and 30 minutes. You said 1 minute and 30 seconds.
Did I say minutes? Sorry.
Yeah, you said minutes and seconds. It was actually an hour 30 to build a 100-point character.
Too much YouTube,
and then
man.
another 30 minutes to refine it. So 2 hours to build a character. That is on the longer side of games these days. That is on the longer side.
My favorite game of everything that I've ever played, Amber Diceless, is my favorite game. I can literally create a character in 10 seconds easily. And it's a point buy system, but it is like so simple to do. So yeah, you could build things super quickly if you know the system. And if you don't, you can spend a while going into all the minutia of stuff.
If Shadow and Son's watching, he's your new best friend right now because he loves Amber. I don't like the gambling. I don't like, but I do get why people like that. And in fact, we'll have to talk about your Diceless when we get back to your Kickstarter or backer crowdfunding. Whatever we're calling
crowdfunding on BackerKit.
On BackerKit, there we go. I'm going to hold on to that one because I'm going to bring this up right now. While Besom mechanics are not to my taste, Mark's attitude and some of the universal material will get my money. Well, look at that. I put the link out there. It's in the description below. Same thing. Heathen Dog, how much anime and superheroes do I like?
Well,
I mean, there's the occasional thing that'll cross my path. That'll be like, okay, that wasn't bad. I'm not into anime or superheroes yet. Look, and I have some of the boxes for like the miniatures and so forth off screen. So I have my own Besom stuff, but I do like the tri-stat system. And I do like the idea that whether Besom or Absolute Power, and this will lead into another question that I have, and you've pretty much answered it, but I'm going to kind of see if I can drag something out of you a little more on this one, is if I own Besom, other than the fact that I'd get the world with it, do I need to own Absolute Power? Of course, the answer is yes. You're a businessman, but
love people to buy it. But the reality is no. I mean, you held up earlier Tri-Stat Core. This is a $15 book. That is, the system is exactly what's in system book 1 for Absolute Power, which is a $60 book. Of course, the difference is going to be in the format, hardcover, softcover, color art,
tiny
presentation. Yeah, tiny, nice pocket edition. And we did this. The Tri-Stat Core is a great table copy. Right. So you have your main book. And then if you're playing Besom or Absolute Power, here's Tri-Stat Core as your second table copy. So if you have Besom, people say, well, why do I need to buy Absolute Power's system book? Not the setting. That's different. Why do I need the system book? And I can't say you need it. one of the things we do that separates out absolute power from Besem a little bit is going from expansion from 1 to 6 attribute levels to 1 to 10. Now, that's not to say that you can't figure out what 7 is. If you see the progression of multiple by 10 every time and you get to 6 and it's 100,000, what's 7? Probably 1 million. And it's not difficult to do that. We present it to be comprehensive and complete, but no, you don't need it. The advantage of the core book for Absolute Power versus the Besem is because we already had a setting built in, where our Besem setting, because it's a universal multi-genre, it was not setting heavy. Absolute Power is. We provide examples throughout the system book that is the settings or the examples or the context of the second book, which is the setting. So when we talk about taunt, we can refer to these characters that have taunt, and here's what level they have it, and here's why they're using it. So it's that example through context is what's important about system book, which is book 1 for Absolute Power. But it's not necessary. If you want to save money, that I would say, if you have Besem, great, buy the second book, which is the setting material. That's more important than rebuying the system, even if we think it's a great product.
Every time you say taunt, I kind of flinch because back in the Earthdawn days, taunt drove us crazy. And it's funny because it sounds like your version of taunt does the exact same thing that it did in Earthdawn, which is like, oh, by the way, remember how you were rolling all these dice? Yeah, no. you're angry, you're being distracted, you're like, now you're only rolling these. All right. Yeah. This one up here. When can I get a rule that will reduce damage as distance increases, like explosion radiuses or long distance range shots?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to create lots of rules specific to your campaign. We have disadvantages at a distance. For example, a gun. If you're firing a gun at someone who's 100 meters away, it's going to be easier than if you're firing them if they're a kilometer away. But in the end, we don't modify the strength of a bullet impact, whether it's 100 meters or a kilometer. I mean, is there a real world? Well, probably. I would guess it's going to have, just based on wind resistance, it's not going to move as quickly. But this is an area where we don't really get into. But certainly working with environmental limiters, so that the way we have games where you can, or attributes we can limit them. If you took an environmental limiter and say, well, here's this weapon and it functions at level 10, and invite an environmental limiter that only functions at level 8 if it is beyond 100 meters or whatever distance you want to have. This is something you can create, but we don't give you the exact specifics because that's specific to your world. Mm-hmm. Our world, we keep things as simple as we can. We give you all the tools to make things as complex as you want, but our base simplicity is, this is the very basic, simple effect it does. And we do that because we think that we need to present the baseline that everyone would use, and then people can go even deeper if they want to on their own. But we can't anticipate that, how much a grenade is going to do based on distance and what kind of grenade. Well, there are, in a superhero game, maybe there's 1,000 different grenades, and they might all have different ranges on how they impact. Some of them might be donuts, where in the initial 10 meters, there's nothing. And then the next 10 meters, it does all the damage. I mean, we can't anticipate everything like that. And so we'll build things through examples and say, here's some gear, here's some gadgets, and you can kind of see what we're doing. And you can use that for inspiration with your own designs.
I love the idea, once again, that's rulings over rules. And as an old school player, that's something I really appreciate. Because let's be fair, there's a lot of rules when it comes to creation of a character and creation of items, creation of gear. So a lot of that is there. And then within that framework, that's when you house rule it. And I'm wondering, and I'm not trying to get into in my day kind of thing necessarily, but one of the things I've noticed, especially with like Pathfinder and D&D 3 players specifically, a lot of them have to look up the rule. Like, where is that rule? I need to know what it is. It's like, no, man, just move on. Just like, this is what it is. It makes sense that you threw a grenade. It's not the most powerful grenade out there. I'm going to say it does half damage. Now let's just move on. Make that ruling based on the framework that the game provides. Nothing wrong with that. No player should be arguing about things like that as long as everybody's having fun. If they're not having fun over something as pedantic as that.
Yeah, it was certainly when I, breeze through Reddit and I read some of the threads. I have hundreds of comments about a D&D thing, and I'm thinking, I don't play D&D like some of these people do. It's just not how I've done it. I mean, yeah, back in second edition, I used to run with weapon speeds. And so when you determine initiation, what is your speed of your weapon? I mean, I got into some heavy level details, but in the end, role playing has always trumped rules. And, it's why I put it in the manifesto about the rules will always take second fiddle to what's just good for a play. So we give you as much framework as we can, but we're not going to deal with every single example. There's a reason we have something called unique attribute and unique defect. And these are the deal with all the things that we hadn't thought up that you want to create for your own. We have a right in unique defect. There you go. You can do it on your own. And so, I think the narration of gameplay is so much more important to me than the rules. Story overrules for me every time.
Yeah, there's one line in the manifesto I don't agree with, but again, it's just philosophical, which is, I believe, I forget because I don't have the oh, wait, I do have the manifesto up. And then we'll go back to your thing. And this isn't to mess with Mark. It's just a kind of funny anecdote from what he's saying right now. We share the screen. Boom. Just easy way, share. This one right here. Should dice rolls conflict with a great story development, the story always wins. And that one makes me shudder because I'm like, no, the dice create the story. It's like, no. But this also goes to show, hold on, follow the rules or don't.
Conflict. If you think the dice create the story, then there's no conflict. Right. And therefore that line does not apply. And that also doesn't mean you always win. Someone would be like, oh, I hate losing. I'm like, I've had some of the best character development when things don't go my way than when things do go my way. I think that having crappy dice rolls has nothing to do with, ruining the story. I think you can make the story better.
Yeah, they enhance it. Absolutely. Yeah. I agree with that. Dog, anything to add to this? Else I'm going to go back and we're going to start looking at some of the products on the backer kit. Wow. Backer kit. Whatever I'm saying. The backer kit crowdfunding.
There you go.
Okay.
No, not really, not right now.
All right, so we talked about the 2 books already. Then there were, here we go, the Heroes and Villains deck.